May the power of Christ compel you. That's right. We're going to do one of the sequels to The Exorcist. The good one. We're going to do it right now. Let's do it. Hey, welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone is doing well out there. And the movie I wanted to review today is The Exorcist 3, or, as I like to think of it, the true sequel to The Exorcist. And definitely the best sequel. The only sequel that counts, really. And as we all know, the original Exorcist, the novel was written by William Peter Blatty. And he wrote the script, and the film was directed by William Friedkin. And that film became an international phenomenon and a huge hit, and considered by many, including myself, as a classic horror film and one of the best of all time. Right after the release of that film, William Peter Blatty had an idea for a sequel novel, and he wrote Legion, which was the sequel to The Exorcist. Although in the novel, there is no exorcism that happens in the novel. And Warner Brothers, as we all know, went ahead and made The Exorcist 2, The Heretic. Now, if you've never seen that film and you're curious, I always encourage people, if you've never seen something, make up your own mind. Check it out. You might enjoy it. In my opinion, that movie is a complete shit show and an abomination of cinema. That movie sucks. I hate it. I've seen it a few times, and I haven't seen it in a long time, and I have no plan on revisiting it because I know it sucks. But let's move on. Now, for years, nothing happened with The Exorcist's name. William Peter Blatty wanted to make Legion into a movie. He wrote the script, and he actually went to a filmmaker about directing it, and that filmmaker was none other than one of my favorite filmmakers, John Carpenter. I would have loved to see what John Carpenter would have done with this film, but the more John Carpenter spoke with Blatty about the film, he realized Blatty really wanted to direct it himself, and he walked away from it. William Peter Blatty took the film to Morgan Creek, and they gave him the money, and he started casting. Now, in the original Exorcist, Lieutenant Kinderman was not played by George C. Scott as he is in this film. He was played by Lee J. Cobb, but unfortunately, that gentleman passed away shortly after the release of the original film, so they had to recast. George C. Scott read the script and signed on, although George C. Scott claims he never saw the original Exorcist when he signed on. He just liked the script. Father Dyer, who was in the original film, is also not played by the original actor. He's played by Ed Flanders in this film. And Ed Flanders, every actor does great in this film, and Ed Flanders is fantastic. The great Brad Dourif was brought in to play the Gemini killer in this film, or Patient X as well. Jason Miller was brought back later in production, and that we'll get into it because this movie was a trouble production, and the studio forced some things on Blatty. We'll get into that a little later. Jason Miller comes back as Patient X / Father Karras. We got the great Scott Wilson in here as Dr. Temple. Most people remember Scott Wilson from The Walking Dead. He played Herschel, but Scott Wilson's been in plenty of films over the years. And Nikolai Williamson came in to play Father Morning. And that character was a late addition to the film as well. This film opens up with a rehash of what happened right at the end of the original Exorcist, with Father Karras jumping out the window, rolling down those famous steps and getting killed. Then we cut to Kinderman going to a crime scene of brutal murder in Georgetown. And we hear whispers of this Gemini killer, which we don't really know fully yet. And Kinderman's like, Gemini killer's dead. Let's find some suspects. And he leaves to go meet Father Dyer at the movies to go see It's a Wonderful Life. It's something these gentlemen do. They're really good friends, and it's kind of their thing. Then they go for lunch afterwards. And you could tell these men really like each other, and they respect each other. They even love each other. But they don't agree on everything. It's a great scene. Ed Flanders and George C. Scott are fantastic. And they're fantastic in the whole film. But it's a really great scene. It really speaks to their relationship in the movie. They don't agree on everything, but they respect each other. And Father Dyer explains to George C. Scott's character that he's going into the hospital for some minor surgery. The next morning, George C. Scott goes and visits Father Dyer, and they have a little bit of dialogue back and forth, and then George C. Scott gets called out to another crime scene, this one involving a child who was brutally murdered. His head's decapitated. And that night, Father Dyer in this hospital is given a paralyzing agent by somebody, and he has all of his blood drained out of him and placed neatly in jars on the side table to his bed. And that's how he's found the next morning. And on the wall behind him, written in blood, it's written, "It's a Wonderful Life." And it's very creepy. We don't see the act, we just see the aftermath. And Kinderman is visibly upset by this. His best friend's just been murdered, and he can't believe how this happened in the hospital. There was a nurse on staff, there's other patients. So they start interrogating everybody or asking questions. And the one nurse said the only thing she saw that was odd was in this hospital, not only do they do surgery and take care of sick people, but there's a mental ward in the hospital, and there's a ward for extremely violent mental patients. And she said the only thing that was strange was when I came out of the office, the one woman from the mental ward was laying on the floor crying. And I led her back there, and that's when I walked in to check on the father, and I found him the way he was. So Kinderman goes down and looks around this mental ward, and he talks to this woman, but she's no use. She keeps repeating herself, and she's gone. Like, she has nothing left. And Scott Wilson calls him aside and starts explaining to him about this other patient he has in the extreme, like the locked up psycho ward. And Kinderman goes in and looks at him, and he gets called away for police business, and he takes off. And then we have Kinderman doesn't know what to make of this, and he's very suspicious, and everything's pointing towards the Gemini killer, but he knows he's dead. How can it be? I mean, it has to be a copycat. And then there's a really cool scene in a church where this priest gets killed in a confession box. It's very creepy, well shot. It's a great scene. And then we get the famous scene of this film, and this is one of the best jump scares ever put to film. The camera's locked off looking down the hospital hallway, and we see this nurse at the station and a security guard, or a police officer. The police officer gets called away, and this nurse goes in to check on a patient. She goes back to the office, goes back to a supply area, and then this goes on for like 2-3 minutes. The scene goes on forever, and the camera's just locked on looking down this hallway. Very minimal movement on the camera. It just kind of gets a little closer a little bit. That's it. It's pretty much a stationary shot. And then she hears a noise. She goes over. She checks the one room. It's nothing. She closes the door and starts walking across the hall back to the office. And all of a sudden, this figure comes out dressed all in white with these big shears right behind her. And it cuts to black. And the next day, they found her body, and the police are all over the hospital. And I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Well, first of all, Kinderman now has a run-in. He goes and talks to patient X, and he realizes this guy looks a lot like the Gemini killer. And he goes, and the Gemini killer pretty much tells him, Brad Dourif, that somebody's going to go visit his house. So he takes off out of the hospital, and by the time he gets home, there's this woman there that was from the mental ward, and his wife's like, I don't know who this nurse is. She's dressed as a nurse, and he's like, I didn't send no nurse. And he sees her, and all of a sudden, a woman reaches in her bag and grabs out these big shears and going to cut his daughter's head off. But he stops her. And this pretty much goes towards the end where I'm skipping over some stuff, but we go towards the end where he has his confrontation with the Gemini killer, or patient X. But Father Morning beats him to it. This was an add-on. There was not originally an exorcism scene in the film. Warner Brothers insisted, originally the film was going to be called Legion, but the studio insisted to call it The Exorcist 3, name recognition, easy to sell. And they forced Blatty, they gave him more money, gave him like $2 million to go film this scene, to go back and film an exorcism scene. They said, we need an exorcism scene. Now we're going to call it The Exorcist 3. He agreed begrudgingly and went back and filmed this scene. Now, Father Morning shows up. This character really doesn't have much build-up. We get the feeling that they kind of set up that he had an involvement in an exorcism before, and he just walks in the cell and starts performing exorcism on patient X. And it's a very elaborate scene, lots of special effects, lots of creepy imagery. It's a really cool scene. It seems a little out of place, but it's so well done, you go with it. And he gets killed for the most part, and then Kinderman comes in, and he has a dialogue with the Gemini killer. He punches him in the face, and they go back and forth, and Gemini killer tells him how he does it. He tells him everything. That's not the virus. It's my allergies. He basically tells him that when the Gemini killer was killed, his father, or this being, we assume it's the same entity that possessed Reagan in the original, gave him the power or the ability to take over the body of Father Karras when he died. And he goes on to explain that he had to work at digging himself out of the grave for days at a time until he can get out of the grave. And then he had to recover, and then he got taken into custody at this mental institution. But the father gave him the ability to possess people. And the easiest people, he lets this line out, which tells you everything you need to know, gave him the ability to possess people, and the easiest people to possess are mentally handicapped people. And it clicks in Kinderman like, oh shit, this guy's been pulling the strings this whole time and making it actually was a Gemini killer killing all these people. It's just through other people. And Kinderman and him go at it, and then finally, it's a great scene between Dorff, Jason Miller, and George C. Scott, because they keep flashing back between Brad Dorff and Jason Miller. Jason Miller was brought back by the studio as well. They demanded him come back to have some tie into the first one. So when Blatty filmed that, which was later, he just intercut with Brad Dorff's performance and Jason Miller and George C. Scott. And Father Karras takes possession of the control of himself and tells Lieutenant Kinderman, shoot me now, kill me. And Kinderman shoots him and kills him. And that's pretty much the end of the film. Now, this film came and went. The film, after with the add-ons, had an $11 million budget. When it was released, it did 26 in America and 39 worldwide. So it made a little bit of money. It wasn't a huge hit. It was kind of forgotten about for a long time. I'm glad to see with the Blu-ray disc that was released by Scream Factory that it's getting more recognition now. I think people are starting to realize how good the film was, and it deserves the recognition it's getting. I would give this film an 8.75 out of 10. I like it that much. I would take a little bit off for some things. I don't want to shit on this film. I really like it. The exorcism scene, for how much I like it, seems like it comes out of nowhere. It really does. And some of the abruptness, like Father Morning, just seems like he's stuck in there. You could tell it was a reshoot and it was just stuck in there. But overall, it's a really good, effective movie. The atmosphere in it that William Peter Blatty creates is fantastic. There's a lot of dread. There's some creepiness in it. That jump scare is phenomenal. Just that alone is just fantastic. And the performances across the board are great. So yeah, 8.75 out of 10 for me for The Exorcist 3. Have you ever seen this movie? What are your thoughts on it? Leave a comment down below. Let me know. Do me a favor, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, all that great stuff. And I hope everyone's doing well. Take care of yourselves, and I'll be back soon. Thanks. Bye.